Wisconsin Sports Zone update. Well, the Bucks have a date for their makeup game with the Pelicans. The NBA announced it would take place April 6th as part of a back-to-back against Miami. The team's game last week was postponed due to a winter storm that hit New Orleans. Milwaukee is on the road right now as they can finish out a four-game trip on Friday in San Antonio. They dropped two of the first three so far, including a loss in Portland last night. Badgers meanwhile are in Maryland, taking a face-off against a Terrapin squad tonight in College Park. Maryland's won three straight, including crushing a ranked Illinois team on the road last week. They'd also won 5 and 6, just outside the AP top 25. Badgers come in ranked number 17 in the country, winners of 8 of 9. Wisconsin's been driven by its offense. Coach Gard says where they want to be, the defense must continue to improve.
From an offensive standpoint, if we can be top 10 in the country, which we are now, defensively, we felt we needed to climb to be top 25 in order to be really elite. Because if you look across the country of who's in that category, it's a pretty high-powered team. So defensively, we were hovering in the 50s, and we need to continue to grow that and get better defensively. And
again, it'll be Wisconsin and Maryland tonight. Tip is at 6.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, we're getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting for spring training. Brewers going to be arriving for camp 2 weeks from today down in Arizona. The first workout slated for the next day. The first full team workout slated for February 18th. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil-Pritt.
Willie? Oh, I mean, the guy can play, man. You want the ball hit to him in a big situation. You want him at the plate in a big situation. That's the best way I can compliment him. He plays every day, and you want him up in every big situation. He's proven it time and time again. That's who he is. He loves it. He revels in it. He wants to talk to you people. He wants to be in the spotlight. And it takes a lot to get there and uphold that day in and day out. I can't say enough about, who he is. Player skills are what they are. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. But who this guy is and how he goes about his business, how he treats people, how he treats his teammates, how he leads, big void. I mean, we've lost a lot. We lost Burns. We lost Hader in the recent years. But losing this guy, woo. It's a new soup, you know what I mean? So we got to get that can opener out and open up the ingredients and pour it in and stir it up. When you lose a guy with that impact, it's huge. For our club and how we're built, that's a big ingredient.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Couple comments for Pat Murphy. Dug those up from December. I was at the MLB meetings. I believe those were in Texas, right? First or second week of December, talking about the departure of Willy Adames. And I play those comments because it gets us into our first point of discussion this evening. I told you last night I wanted to get to the Brewers. There was something I wanted to discuss. We didn't get to it. Apologies. But in order to ensure we got to it tonight, not leaving it to chance, I'm not risking that this topic gets pushed back because Badger Bloodies or Cone Roller calls in to talk about Greg Gard, and then Clemhead Mike says something about his late father, and then all of a sudden it's 5:55, and we never got to it. So we're going to start with it. I want to start with the Brewers tonight. A little bit of commentary from Pat Murphy should do the trick. That should get us started, right? This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Two guests tonight. Jesse Temple, that's nothing new, in the second hour of the show. And Jesse interacted with me on Twitter, I believe for the first time ever this week, which doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things, but man, it sure felt nice. Jesse noticed me on Twitter. He was actually commenting on Clemhead Mike's call that I clipped and tweeted. So it's not that Jesse noticed a tweet and said, hey, Grant, that's a good point about the Badgers, or wow, I want to talk about that. He basically was saying, holy balls, what do you guys talk about from 4 to 6 when I'm not on the show talking Badgers? So he's going to join us at 5:30. He'll make his weekly appearance to talk mostly Wisconsin basketball. I asked him a little bit at the end, is like, look, is there anything going on with football that we should be aware? Doesn't seem like it, but did I miss something? And he basically said, mostly basketball. So we're going to talk about that to wrap up the show. In about 20 minutes, Matthew Coller, Purple Insider, going to join us because I saw him, this dirty, devious man, Matthew, and I say that in a good way, tweeted yesterday, and I bookmarked this. The title of his post at Purple Insider, the title of his column or his, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, and the accompanying podcast is, How Can the Vikings Catch the Eagles? Right? And I messaged him. I said, well, I was kind of talking about the same thing yesterday. Vikings did a lot of good things. Packers did a lot of good things. And yet I look at the Eagles. I'm like, how'd they get all that talent? Like, how do we do that? What are our general managers doing wrong? So we're going to talk with Matthew, Vikings guy, but an unbelievable football analyst. He wrote the book, Football is a Numbers Game, about Pro Football Focus. We talked about that at the Super Bowl last year. Very good book. Would recommend. He's going to join us to talk Packers, Vikings, as they relate to the best teams in the conference, like the Eagles. Could also include the Rams, the Niners in previous years. What's keeping the Packers and the Vikings from just taking that one additional step to breaking through, not just being a playoff team or a wild card team, but back to the conference championship, ideally for the first time in 15 years now for the Packers, back to the Super Bowl. So we'll talk with Matthew in about 20 minutes. Still time for your calls this evening, 608-321-1670. Call and text, and then comment on the live stream as Rick and Spencer are already chiming in on YouTube. You can watch on Facebook as well and on Twitter at Wisco Grant. So I play you that comment from Pat Murphy about the absence of Willie Adames, the lack of Willie Adames. That's where I want to start. And this is what's been weighing on me. I posted a little video in the Quick Trip Car Wash earlier today, kind of teasing this. I'm worried about what the Brewers are going to do at third base. Right? Now, as Brewers fans, we're no strangers to the idea of going into a season unsure of a certain spot or unsure of the bullpen or unsure of the starting rotation. We often go into seasons thinking or knowing, well, I don't know who that guy is going to be yet. I don't know who those guys are going to be yet, but there's options, right? Last year, I didn't love any of the starting pitchers. Like, man, that guy could win a Cy Young, other than maybe Freddie, who had a fine year. But we looked at the rest. It's like, well, they got Wade Miley. They got Aaron Ashby, who's going to be coming back healthy. They brought in a big selection of guys. So we're like, well, they're just going to throw numbers at that problem. Some of them will have a good year. It'll work itself out. Same in the past in the outfield. Who's going to play right field? It's like, well, there's no clear-cut answer, but they got 2 or 3 options. I feel okay about the best option presenting itself in spring training. It'll get worked out, right? Well, I'm not so sure about the third base position right now. I'd feel a lot better about the third base position if Willie Adames was here. Willie Adames, who signed a huge deal in San Francisco, I think it will age poorly. Doesn't mean I didn't want to keep him, but I don't think it's going to be a good deal. I especially don't think that's going to be a good deal in that ballpark, right? A fly ball reliant shortstop playing in that ballpark. I mean, I'm not trying to spite the guy as he leaves and as he goes somewhere else, but I understand why the Brewers weren't comfortable ponying that up. And the Brewers were in a hitter-friendly park. You know what I mean? So I understand why Willie's gone. But Willie was over 3 WAR. He's 3.41. He was a 3 WAR player last year. He had 112 RBIs, 32 home runs, and he played in 161 games. It's not like losing your number 4 starter, right? That's not like losing Mike Moustakas after a 1-year or a Yasmani Grandal after a 1-year deal, right? That's a significant, that's arguably the cornerstone of their lineup, or was a big cornerstone of their lineup last year. So you take that cornerstone out, all of a sudden the other bricks that weren't so great before, but you're like, well, at least the cornerstone's there. We can make the window frame work. We can make, the eaves up there by the gutter. We can make that work because we got the cornerstone. I'm not a construction worker. I don't know if that analogy makes any sense, right? But okay, we'll figure out third base. At least you know who's going to be at short, Willie Adames. That's a cornerstone. You know who's going to be at second, Bryce Terang. And at first, Rhys Hoskins, whoever. You got catcher. You love your outfield. If it's just the third base position that's unsure, we can live with that. Well, now you lose Willie Adames and his 100 RBIs from last season. We assume Joey Ortiz is going to short. Okay. I mean, if he has 112 RBIs next year, oh my God. But third base becomes a little bit more important. And currently their options are Caleb Durbin and Oliver Dunn. Again, if Willie Adames was still playing short, I might feel a little bit better about that. I'd feel more okay with that. But they lost over 100 runs. They lost a 3 WAR player. And we don't know who's playing third. That's a combination of factors that I don't feel so great about. And earlier this afternoon, one of the better remaining infield options that was assumedly going to be available for a lesser deal. Ha-Seong Kim came off the board. He signed with the Rays for 2 years, $29 million, with an opt-out after the first year. The classic type of player on the classic type of deal that the Brewers would look to sign, right? So that's one of the options now off the board. Alex Bregman always seemed like a pipe dream. I would be gobsmacked if the Brewers find a way to do that, unless the entire league really doesn't want him. It's not like they're giving Alex Bregman 5 years and a couple dozen million to come in here. Ha-Seong Kim felt like the most realistic option to add in at third base. Now, he probably wants to play short, and I assume the Rays on some level probably promised him that. The Brewers probably want to move Joey Ortiz to short, but in the interest of being the best team possible, I'd be okay with 1 year of Ha-Seong Kim at short, leave Joey Ortiz at third, where he was very productive. I prefer that to Joey Ortiz at short, currently question mark at third base. Ha-Seong Kim for $29 million over 2 years with an option after the first year. I would have loved that for the Brewers. They can do that. They can absolutely do that. But they've shown a real hesitance to bump up the payroll from last year to this year. They have the excuse of the medicals probably being a little shaky because Kim's coming off a shoulder injury. It'd be one thing if he was a pitcher. He's an infielder. So I that's a deal I would have done. I think most Brewers fans would say the same thing. I don't know what Matt Arnold would tell you if you put a microphone in his face. I certainly don't know what he'd tell you if you gave him a truth serum. I think if you put a microphone in his face, he'd say, well, it's a player that we thought about, we looked into, but the injury risk and a large 1 year, I mean, we're already paying this guy and that guy, it was something we obviously heavily considered, but at the end, we just thought it best to not. That's probably what he'd say. If you gave him a truth serum, he'd probably say, we didn't have the money. Ownership or where, we just didn't want to expand payroll. But I tell you what, if they could have brought Ha-Seong Kim in, who's now a Tampa Bay Ray, then I feel a lot better about this infield. I am, and I think you know this if you listen to the show, I give the Brewers the benefit of the doubt in just about every way possible when it comes to fielding a competitive team that's going to contend for a playoff spot. And if you don't give them the benefit of the doubt for going over their win total and making it into the playoffs, then I don't know what you've been watching. Winning playoff series, contending for a championship, that's, of course, something different. But surpassing their win total and being better than the Reds and the Pirates and the Cardinals and the Cubs, we have so much recent precedent that they just know how to do that. Even when you don't really see the plan, even when you don't really see how they're going to do it, you just kind of know, you just kind of feel that they're going to do it. But this year, more than the last couple, even, last year, a change at manager. Not that far removed from a change at general manager. Not that far removed from losing Brandon Woodruff to injury and losing Corbin Burns to the Orioles. Let's not act like the Brewers have been, stable able over the last couple of years. There's been plenty of change, and still they've remained consistent throughout and surpassed their win total, dominated the division, and made it into the playoffs. I've given them the benefit of the doubt throughout the stretch. They have earned that. My benefit of the doubt is being tested because I thought they had, at the very least, economic chances to add another player into that third base mix. Maybe they love Caleb Durbin behind closed doors. And maybe in spring training and early on in the season, we go, holy balls, they did it again. Look at this guy. Or maybe Oliver Dunn. I don't know. Maybe we get to spring training and Pat Murphy hits us with the old, I think he's going to take a quantum leap. And a quantum leap for Oliver Dunn would be being a Major League Baseball player for an entire season because last year he wasn't able to stay in the majors. And for good reason. They had other options. This year, some of those other options are gone. So my benefit of the doubt is being tested. Lose Willy Adames, who's a 3-WAR player, 110, 112 RBIs. All of a sudden, the margins are tested quite a bit more when you don't have that cornerstone. So Willy Adames and question mark at third. That's something else than Joey Ortiz now changing positions and a question mark at third. Now, I think there's a real possibility they give Sal Frelick looks at third base again this year. And even if he can play the position and be good defensively, which was uber important to the Brewers last year, Joey Ortiz's defense at third helped them win games they wouldn't have otherwise won. Even if Sal Frelick can hack it defensively, there's still no pop in that bat. There's no power. There's no lift. Right? So if Sal Frelick is your third baseman, you're suffering offensively. Even if he can hit for average and get on base a ton, which he did a okay job of last year, but still not a good enough job to make up for the absence of power and pop. Even if he can hack it at third defensively, well, now you're relying on someone like Garrett Mitchell in the outfield to stay healthy every day, to not go through 30, plate appearance stretches where he just can't put the bat to the ball. So you start to rob Peter to pay Paul. You see why my concern at third base is well-founded, right? I thought that maybe Ha-Seong Kim, and I'm glad we waited to talk about this until today, because had we talked about this last night, I probably would have done 5 or 6 minutes on why the Brewers should really heavily consider getting Ha-Seong Kim, whether it's to play short or third. Even if they, in a perfect world, would love Joey Ortiz to play short. Let's not act like they haven't moved infielders around before. Mike Moustakas and Travis Shaw played second base once upon a time. So they've been able to figure it out. They've slid chess pieces around before. It's $29 million for Ha-Seong Kim over 2 years that I think the Brewers would have been really wise to invest and really smart to invest. And the fact that he got the money from the Rays, that tells me it's even smarter. If he signs that deal with the Reds, who just took on the rights to pay Taylor Rogers a bunch of money earlier today. Okay, well, if the Reds did it, then maybe dodged a bullet there. It was the Rays, which is further confirming, via past precedent and past evidence, the Rays know what they're doing. The Rays out-Brewers'd the Brewers here. It's $29 million. I think the Brewers would have really been wise to try to invest in an additional infielder, because now you get yourself some breathing room. Now we're looking at third base. It's like, well, I don't know who it's going to be. It's either going to be Ha-Seong Kim or Oliver Dunn or Caleb Durbin. At least there's one proven commodity in that mix. Right now, there are 0. And that becomes especially important in a way it wouldn't have been important last year, because Willie Adames is gone. And you look no further back than December, and I'll play this cut again, when Pat Murphy talked about Willie Adames, what made him unique, why this loss is so significant.
The guy can play, man. You want the ball hit to him in a big situation. You want him at the plate in a big situation. That's the best way I can compliment him. He plays every day, and you want him up in every big situation. He's proven it time and time again. That's who he is. He loves it. He revels in it. He wants to talk to you people. He wants to be in the spotlight. And it takes a lot to get there and uphold that day in and day out. I can't say enough about, who he is. Player skills are what they are. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. But who this guy is and how he goes about his business, how he treats people, how he treats his teammates, how he leads, big void. We've lost a lot. We lost Burns. We lost Hader in the recent years. But losing this guy, woo.
And he said, especially the way we're built and the way we operate, it hurts even worse. I agree, which is why I think another 20-ish to 30-ish million on Ha-Seong Kim would have been a worthwhile investment. If nothing else, just to put another good card in your hand. Who knows how it's going to turn out? But by going into this season with no other options at third base other than Durbin, Dunn, and possibly Frelick, which then tests your outfield depth. Like I just that the path to success and excellence just narrows a little bit with that approach. So I'm worried about who's on third. It just concerns me a little bit. Still love the Brewers, their process, still feel great about them, but that's a real concern. The likes of which I don't know that we've seen with them going into a season the last couple of years, especially now that Adames is gone. If you have thoughts on this, I'll take your call next. Matthew Coller, Purple Insider, going to join us in about 15 minutes. But you before Coller. We'll get to you before we get to Matt. 608-321-1670. Your thoughts next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Don't even want to think about it. I'm just excited for him. You know, the human being that he is, that's what makes him great. It's his attitude that he brings every single day, how he goes about his business, consummate professional. He was a leader in our clubhouse. He did as much for the ball club as anybody. Played 161 games and would have played 162, but yeah, I mean, this kid is he's special. He deserves everything he gets. I couldn't be happier.
It's another soundbite from Pat Murphy from December talking about the loss of Willie Adames. In hindsight, why did they have him play 161? Either you're going to give him some time off or you might as well play all 162. In hindsight, looking back, isn't that it's kind of stupid, kind of dumb, isn't it? We would have played all 162, but symbolically, I'll give him 1 day rest. Like, what was the point of that? I give the Brewers benefit of the doubt. I think they've earned it when it comes to outperforming their win expectation, their win total, being more consistent and competitive relative to the rest of their division, making the playoffs. They get the benefit of the doubt. My benefit is being stretched a little bit, given that they lost a 3+ WAR player with 112 RBIs last year. And their plan to replace him is decent in Joey Ortiz. Okay. But then what about third base? Caleb Durbin and Oliver Dunn? And maybe Sal Frelick? Ugh. It's a lot of question marks. And if the group was Ha-Sung Kim and Oliver Dunn and Caleb Durbin, okay. But he just signed for, $30 million over 2 years with an option because of his medicals with Tampa, a team that doesn't spend money. And they thought it worth the investment, right? They outspent the Brewers in their own stingy way. A couple minutes for your calls. Doesn't have to be on the Brewers. Badgers basketball at Maryland tonight. Huge game. Could discuss that or any preliminary Packers thoughts. Matthew Coller, Purple Insider, going to join us in about 10 or 12 minutes. So we're about to move to football anyways. Anything is on the table. I'll take your calls. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, it's Colin. I'm loving the hot stove talk to warm us up on this chilly January.
Chilly. Yeah, a little hot stove talk is always good. I think it's actually convenient for the show that Ha-Sung Kim signed today. He was one of the very Brewers-ish remaining options. I give him the benefit of the doubt, Cone, but I wish they would have done a little bit more this offseason, especially when losing Willie. That's all I'm trying to say. I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is we're just expecting a lot more production out of the guys that we have to kind of fill that Willie Adames hole. I mean, getting Yelich back from injury, that's basically like bringing in a big free agent signing, if you think of it that way.
I suppose.
Garrett Mitchell's going to need a big year out of him. Reese Hoskins, do we see a bounce back year? Year 2 of Jackson Churio. There is a lot of areas where our existing players can produce a lot more. So,
That's true.
I'm going to miss Willie. He seems like the ultimate locker room guy, but I think with the horses they got now, they can fill that production.
Look, there's plenty to be excited about. It's just not necessarily on the left side of that infield. And if Bryce Terang, doesn't have the first half that he had last year, it's like, I just don't know that you're going to get much production from this infield at all. And I hope Rhys Hoskins, another year removed from the injury, there's a lot to be hopeful for there. Christian Yelich coming back, obviously, and William Contreras at catcher. So it's not like they're bereft of pop. It's just difficult to think you might get no pop combined from second and shortstop and third. And Joey Ortiz is going to give you more than nothing. But compared to Willie, you're still taking a step back. So we'll see. And who knows? We'll probably get to spring training and Pat Murphy will start gassing up Oliver Dunn and watch. He'll be great. And this whole conversation will be rendered moot.
Yeah, I'll be boots on the ground for some spring training out here. So, I'll be watching the hot corner, with an extra set of eyes.
You get the binoculars down at the ballpark at Maryvale. Just start really getting dialed in. I like that.
Yeah, maybe do some scorekeeping. Although scorekeeping a spring training game, that's tough. A lot of substitutions.
It's a lot. It's probably good practice for scorekeeping a real game. If you can score a spring training game, you're probably set.
Hey, Grant, it's spring training for the fans as well.
That's true. That's
People
true.
need to remember that.
You have any preliminary thoughts on Wisconsin, Maryland before I let you go?
Not really, other than, it's tough to win on the road in this Big Ten. But I love the Badgers' attitude going into it. Greg Gard will play anywhere, anytime. Just let us know when and where. So,
yeah.
I think that's just a great attitude to go into this road game. And, I think Badgers take care of business, get the dub.
Tonight would be, maybe since the Arizona game, I appreciate it, Cone, their biggest game. Let's put it this way. Their biggest conference win to date if they're able to get it tonight. Maryland's coming off a 1-point win at Indiana. They're coming off a comfortable win at Illinois, too. So they're playing very good basketball right now. This should be, the crowd should be rocking. This will be a big-time college basketball game tonight. So plenty to look forward to. There's going to be stakes. So if you're someone's like, well, college basketball, it's kind of my thing, but how am I supposed to get, fired up for Wisconsin, Ohio State on a Tuesday night? This is one of the games, you circle 5 or 6 of them throughout the year, excluding postseason play. This is one of them that you can get up for. Let's take another call. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grand Bills. Thomas.
Thomas.
In La Crosse. Happy Hump Day.
Happy Hump Day, Thomas. What's going on?
Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Is that better? I'm at the gym currently, so.
Did you just put me on speaker?
Nope. You are not.
Oh, well, it sounds good either way. I was just wondering. What's up?
All right, I'll try and muffle it out too.
Fine.
Well, as promised, the top. Hold on. I got the top 50 free agents. Like I talked about this morning with Bo.
Okay.
T. Higgins, according to ESPN Plus, and who's their guy? Hold on.
Thomas, I can't do this. We'll try again tomorrow. I can't. What's going on there? Are you setting up a? What are you doing? You're at the which is fine. People have called from louder places. What are you doing? Do you have a list of free agents in front of you? Is T. Higgins the most heralded? I haven't looked at any of the free agent lists yet. Not that I won't. It's just we've had plenty to talk about between the actual football games and Badgers hoops and doing a little Brewers talk. It's not that free agency isn't a worthwhile conversation. I don't know that it's the most pressing topic tonight, which is fine. Sometimes we talk about things that aren't the most pressing topics, but is T. Higgins the number one guy? Khalil Mack going to be out there as well. The problem with looking at free agency lists in late January is that 50%, seems like even north of 50% of those guys on the list, they're never going to become available because they're going to sign extensions with their current teams, or they're going to get tagged, or something is going to take them off the market. So you have to look at the top 50 free agents. Maybe 25 of them, maybe, at least at this moment in time, will hit free agency by the time the Packers have a crack at them. And then a big portion of those, the best ones, are probably going to go for big game-changing money right away. And the Packers typically don't do that. So Packers fans were left to say, well, actually, free agency, some of the best deals are signed later on, So it's just, we have a lot of hurdles to clear, Thomas, and anyone else who's thinking about free agency. And I'm thinking about free agency. We've had conversations about Khalil Mack and, T. Higgins. If nothing else is an interesting jumping off point to talk about the Packers wide receiving core and how it may need to be adjusted or supplemented. It's just, we have so many hurdles to clear to where on January 29th, it's difficult to even have a conversation about. for reasons unrelated to Thomas's issue. I don't know what he was doing in the wreck. I don't know if he was in between sets. It's just you hit me with a hold on a sec like 3 times. That's too many times. You hit me with hey, just give me 1 sec. That's fine. 2 or 3 times. We're gonna move on. Sorry, Thomas. We'll try again. Maybe tomorrow or Friday. Matthew Coller, Purple Insider. He's gonna join us next. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It was so important to us this year to get back to the way we should play at US Bank Stadium. So to finish 7-1 in front of our fans and have that kind of atmosphere in a game like this is why we do what we do, and love the support of our fans. Thought it was phenomenal tonight, as always. It was huge for us. Now we get to go on the road. One of the best teams in football all year long. We got to go to their place and roll it out there for 60 minutes.
That was Kevin O'Connell after the Packers game. That was like the pinnacle. At that moment, I'm like, man, the Vikings, it's a stacked team, really well coached, great defensive coordinator. And then after that, it just wasn't the same. They got bullied by the Lions, and then they sputtered out against the Rams. So that comment from Kevin O'Connell kind of gets us into our next segment, our conversation now with Matthew Coller, who's here. Purple Insider's been on the show a good number of times. He also authored the book Football is a Numbers Game about Pro Football Focus. It's very good. Matthew, how have you been? Oh, I can't hear you. Hold on one sec, Matthew. Are you muted? Do I have you muted? I should be able to hear you. Why can't I hear you? I should be able to hear you. Oh, man. Well, you first of all, you look great as we figure this out. Let me go. You can you look awesome. What the hell? Hey, I'm gonna kick you. Just come back with that link. We'll try one more time. And I guess if that doesn't work, then I can give you a call. Sorry about that. We're gonna be at Radio Row next week. I'll plug a sponsor in the meantime. Artie's Flipside Pub and Grill in La Crosse. Food and fun without the franchise. I always tell you. They're going to be sending us next week to Radio Row, which last year we were joined by Matthew Coller, Purple Insider. We'll try one more time. Can I hear you now?
How about now? Are we good?
Sometimes, yeah, you just unplug it and plug it back in. So how have you been? You were saying.
Not busy, I'll tell you that. For the most part, I have just been trying to figure out what the hell happened at the end of the season, and I'm sure that they are doing the same thing inside TCO Performance Center as well. Like, what went on there? How in the world did this team go from whooping the Packers for the most part? I know they came back at the end, but I mean, beating them by 200 yards and controlling that football game, and then suddenly forgetting how to play football over the next 2 weeks after that. And I've been picking apart every part of the roster, what they're going to do in the future. And it's been even strange interacting with the fans, because if you talk to Vikings fans, you'd think they won 4 games this year, and they did everything wrong. And O'Connell was the wrong play call for every play, and Sam Darnold was terrible, and all that. I mean, it's such a weird world, and you're living in the same place when you have a really good regular season and everything kind of goes right for you, and then you lose early in the playoffs. And it's like, am I supposed to spend all offseason just ripping into them because they lost to Detroit and because they lost to the Los Angeles Rams? I think what we really saw was the weaknesses that were on display that they had, and it was the 2 worst matchups. How about this? I mean, they lost to 2 teams all year, and they were the same 2 teams. It was Detroit and it was the Los Angeles Rams. And I think that the matchups were just not in their favor against those 2 teams. Had it been anybody else, maybe we'd be talking about a different fate.
It's really weird because the Packers, like what you're talking about now, was an amazing season, but then it ended poorly. So you're supposed to throw out the whole season. We did that in the season. We were doing that in the midst of the season because they were winning all these games, but they couldn't win in the division and they couldn't beat the Eagles. They lost to the Eagles twice, the Vikings twice, and the Lions twice. A bizarre season. The Bears once at the end with Malik Willis. That game was, in a weird sense, maybe the most frustrating of them all. So Packers and Vikings fans, I guess, are both experiencing some conflict about the seasons we just finished. A lot of people would just say, well, Sam Darnold turned into a pumpkin. He was bad all along and it just waited. Do you think it's more nuanced than that? There's got to be more to the story than that.
Oh, of course. I mean, anytime you can wrap up anything in football in a single sentence, then it's probably wrong. Because, I mean, look at that play by Josh Allen at the end where he gets blitzed by Steve Spagnuolo, and you've still got, even today, former football players fighting with each other about what happened on that play and what caused it. That's one single play in a game. So 2 games trying to wrap them up by saying, well, it was just Sam Darnold. is not accurate at all. But I think against the Rams, it was everyone. It was the fact that the offensive line could not handle their D line. They faced the most difficult defensive line in the entire NFL. The very next week, they sacked Jalen Hurts 5 times and he lost something like 60 yards, which really tells you that's against the premier offensive line in the NFL, just how difficult it was to go up against that version of the Rams. The Rams also, I think, won 8 out of their last 10 games or something, and they shut down every offense that they faced down the stretch. So they were playing their best football. It's also a little bit of student and teacher with Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell, where it seemed like McVay had all the answers. He was sending corner blitz off their condensed sets, which they love. So they run play action out of those, and that was easy pressure on Darnold. They took advantage of the weaknesses. Cam Robinson at left tackle, filling in for Christian Darrisaw, really struggled down the stretch. Well, guess who was over top of him a lot of that game? Jared Verse, just dominating him, who's one of the best young players in the league. So we're really talking about a lot of different things that happened. The Vikings never had a run game that they could beat anybody with. They always needed to pass the football down the field to have an explosive offense. And if you're going to throw it down the field, what does that take? Sam Darnold had the third longest time from snap to throw in the NFL. When they got the front four, I mean, we've seen the 49ers in the past beat teams like this in the playoffs that they're not supposed to beat because they have the D line and you don't have the O line. And there you go. So I think had they played maybe a different team in the first round, they could have won. They probably wouldn't have beat Philadelphia under any circumstances, but who knows what would have happened. It's sort of also weird that they win 14 games and then have to go on the road to play somebody, which is not usually the case. So kind of everything, everywhere, all at once caused them to lose those 2 games.
You mentioned McVay, student teacher, and we felt that a bit with LaFleur too. He's weirdly, I don't think he's ever lost to McVay. And some of those were like the playoff game at Lambeau in 2021 with mostly empty seating. Like, I don't remember who the backup was, but it was someone not great. And then this last year, they got the Rams at SoFi, but Stafford didn't have Puka. He didn't have Cooper. So part of that is luck, but he's also struggled against Shanahan in the postseason too. My takeaway after the Vikings-Rams game the next day, I came on the air and I said, guys, I think if Andy Reid didn't exist, we'd widely be accepting Sean McVay as the best coach in football. And not just as a schemer, because we give lots of guys credit as a schemer, but as a whatever, use whatever cliche term, leader of men, culture builder, hirer, developer of coaches. Like I somehow still think he is underrated, big picture, maybe not by the most hardcore football people, but a big picture. I still think he's underrated, which is wild to think.
Well, I think we also felt like after they won the Super Bowl and then the next year they didn't make the playoffs, like, okay, well, they had their kind of moment in the sun, but then they make the playoffs 2 years in a row. They're very close to beating Detroit last year, and then they beat the Vikings. Then they're very close to beating the Eagles in that game. And I don't think they have quite the roster of some of those other teams. I just felt like McVay had all the answers for everything that Kevin O'Connell was going to do with his offense, probably because it's a lot of McVay's offense, and he knows the things that are the most challenging. The other thing is, too, Kevin O'Connell is a very young coach, and it's only his second playoff game ever. And if we go back, what was Andy Reid's reputation when he was in Philly? Oh, well, when he gets to the playoffs, he melts down. I mean, even Sean McVay got completely owned by Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl. Why? Because a lot of the great coaches will change up something really significant when they get to the playoffs. Take, for example, suddenly Patrick Mahomes is a runner. Not just a scrambler, but actually designed runs, which he never did ever before. And then they get in the biggest situation and they pull out something they've never done. I think that McVay, having the experience that he has in the playoffs, understands that next level to playoff football. And something that I've really observed in the playoffs is no offensive line can handle any defensive line in the playoffs. I mean, it's almost been all the way through every single game where even the Texans are making life really difficult on the Chiefs. One of the Chiefs offensive linemen got picked up off the ground and thrown at Mahomes. The stunts, the blitzes, all the stuff that just the fact that now guys who used to be defensive ends back in the day are playing inside at 280 pounds, and they're so quick. Kalijah Cansey dominated that game in Washington for the Tampa Bay Bucks. He's very undersized, but he's getting into the backfield, causing lots of problems. I think that the Vikings, not only their offensive line, but also their system was really created to be able to hold up for Sam Darnold. And once it didn't, they just didn't have an answer. They had one of the worst screen games in the league, one of the least used screen games in the league. They couldn't just hand off to a Saquon Barkley, or they couldn't just, I mean, you look at the things that Andy Reid was running at the Bills, the quick passing game. I mean, they had no chance. Even Jaden Daniels against the Lions blitzed 48% of the snaps against Jaden Daniels, but he was something like 16 for 20 on passes under 10 yards, ball coming out in 2.2 seconds. That's something that the Vikings did not do all year, which was great for them when they were hitting deep shots to Jefferson and Addison and they're destroying the Bears. But it's a different story when you get to the playoffs and face the most dangerous D-line in the league.
O-lines have struggled. Zach Tom at his worst game of the year at the worst time. It just seems to happen to a lot of O-lines. You're like, oh, we're good. We don't have to worry about that. And then you get to the playoffs, and a lot of the times the stakes can change. Matthew Coller is here. You can read and listen and subscribe to his work at Purple Insider and get his book, Football is a Numbers Game, as well. One thought on the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and then I want to ask you a Packers-Vikings thing. And this struck me so hard at the end of Chiefs-Bills. It's not just that the Chiefs are winning at a Patriots-like pace. It's not just that they're stacking playoff wins. They're in another conference championship game. They're in another Super Bowl. It looks the same. Like, got to have it 3rd and 9. It's not some unbelievable Mahomes pulling a throw out of his rear end to Tyreek Hill. It's a 9-yard little to some RJP Ryan. Like, it looks like it looked with the Patriots. It's so simple, and they execute at such a high level. And maybe teams like the Vikings, or I can think of other Packers teams in the past, we got to hit back shoulders. We got to do these timing routes. Like, no, maybe simple route concepts that are well designed and practiced and executed at a high level. Maybe that's what actually wins. And if we watch the Patriots, now we watch the Chiefs, that's all I notice in these high level playoff games.
Well, there's something else I think about too with clutch, which maybe 10 years ago was a debate with people, is certain, players clutch. And I remember someone bringing up the stat that Derek Jeter's batting average is exactly the same in the playoffs over 150 games as it is in the regular season. But you think about the ability to be the same in the playoffs is super dangerous. It's not that Patrick Mahomes is so much better. It's that he's the same and he's always great. And it never seems to get to him. And I was thinking about it because, there's the obvious Michael Jordan comparison where it seems like he's almost laughing in those moments rather than everybody else in the world feeling the tension, feeling the pressure. And as they do it time and time again, it almost becomes funnier to him. Like, oh, I'm just going to do it to them again. And the other part of it is with Mahomes, he always understands the situation. There was a moment in that game where the 2-minute warning in the first half was ticking down, but the play clock was really close to it. And he calmly walked over to the referee and he said, is that going to be the 2-minute warning or not? It's like every single circumstance, situation, down, distance, time on the clock, exactly what you need. We need a first down here. It can't be a 3 and out. It can't be an incompletion. It's got to be the right guy to go to at the right time, or this is the time to scramble because they're playing a certain defense and we need X number of yards. I mean, it's just like he and Andy Reid are so in sync with this that when you do it time and time and time and time again, the same way it's always done, it's a lot harder to stop, I feel like, in the playoffs because everybody's nervous, everybody's anxious, and those small mistakes by the Bills, one missed assignment or something, that's going to be the difference when the other team just doesn't make catastrophic mistakes.
Well, and the more big playoff games that Patrick Mahomes wins, the less stressful they get, the easier they get. And the more big time playoff games that the Bills lose, the tighter they. So it's this vicious circle that feels like it's not going to end anytime soon. It was the same with the Patriots. So yesterday, I began the show by talking about Brian Gutekunst and the job that he's done. Rob Domofsky put out a story yesterday where he talked to people around the league and former Packers staffers. Like, he's got a plan, phase 1, phase 2, we're into year 3. And, I think Goody's done a very good job. I think there are some shortcomings on this roster and this team that I don't notice with other teams. And I saw your YouTube, your podcast from earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday. I saw it yesterday about how the Vikings can catch the Eagles, right? So what does Howie Roseman do such a good job of? What are maybe some things that he does that other, even good general managers kind of fail to do? Because there's a huge gap with the roster. It's not that the Vikings and the Packers couldn't beat the Eagles, but the roster just feels so stacked. It feels like it doesn't have a weakness.
Right. When you go over roster for roster, almost every team versus the Eagles, they're probably going to win because They are good at every single position. They really don't have a weakness. Every single spot on the line is good. The receivers are good. The running back's unbelievable. The D line is good. It used to be that their corners were the weakness, but now they're good. I think there's a little bit of Howie Roseman has been doing this now with the Eagles for long enough that it's sort of a sweet science for them. They sort of have their philosophies. They look a couple years ahead. So they take a Cam Jurgens in the draft and people go, well, you don't need that position. And like, haha, 2 years from now we will. So I think they're pretty good at that. I think they're very good at identifying players like Cooper DeJean and saying, that guy might be a little overrated or underrated because he's the white cornerback that no one's paying attention to his athleticism. So we're going to go for him. Or a Quinyon Mitchell who didn't go to a top university, but if he did, he probably would have been a top 10 draft pick. They also picked a lot of Georgia players that ended up working out. But even the Jalen Carter thing, they took advantage of, well, the guy was street racing, so he's going to drop a few spots and we're going to do it. They've been really good at that. They've also been lucky AF, my friend. I mean, you just do not get on a draft heater like this with any amount of scouting or any amount of, I'm a football wizard genius in the draft. It does not happen like it's happened for them and at the perfectly right time. They also managed Jalen Hurts, rookie contract, took advantage of that, signed him to an extension that still gave them space to make moves. The AJ Brown thing just fell out of the sky. I'm not saying the Eagles are lucky. They're smart, but also who would not have taken AJ Brown off their hands at that point, considering Tennessee was silly enough to try to trade him away. So a lot of things that they've hit on, it's just sort of all worked. They have the best offensive line coach in the league, I think. I think that their system works really well. But even the Saquon Barkley thing, I mean, teams that signed older running backs to huge contracts usually did not have it work out. But then this one works out in gold. I think that everything he's touched has sort of worked. It probably won't work that way for 10 years, but for right now, it's got him to a Super Bowl. And if you're talking about what does Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah or Brian Gutekunst need to do, well, one thing is get lucky as hell. That's one thing. Yeah. But also, you can't really try to emulate too much what they're doing because their offensive line is so astoundingly good that they can do a lot of things I feel like other teams can't do. But really, I mean, it comes down to that, right? Do we think that they have the best coach in the league? I don't think so, but they have certainly been able to stack the heck out of the roster through the draft and a couple of savvy moves.
Well, and what's maddening is, so the Packers, their first round pick was Jordan Morgan. He was hurt most of the year. And their first round pick last year, Lucas Van Ness, who hasn't popped like a lot of folks hoped. And it cost the defensive line coach their job. I think in part that was part of it. And then as a Packers fan, I'd love to be able to say, well, we got Josh Jacobs, though. What an amazing addition. It's like, okay, but they did the same thing with Barkley. And that's a step up. You know what I mean? As good as Jacobs was this year and as advantageous of a move that was. So it just feels like the Eagles or every other team, except more so. And I guess luck is a part of it as well. The way that some of the picks lined up, the Carson Wentz. Looking back, why did a team give up a first and a third for Carson Wentz? I completely forgot about that. A caller brought that up yesterday. I'm like, wait, yeah, they got multiple good picks for that. So I don't want to ascribe that to luck, but geez.
No, that is luck because someone was stupid enough to do it. I mean, that's what I mean is that just over the last couple years, everything has worked. And again, this is not to say that they didn't earn it or they didn't have good process. Drafting really good offensive linemen is a smart idea, and it's certainly played out really well for them. And having an incredible offensive line coach is really good. When you look at the Vikings offensive line, they had a 6th round tackle moved to guard, and he played all the games, and it was bad the whole season. They drafted a 2nd rounder, and it didn't work out. So then they had to go to Dalton Reisner, who's just sort of a guy there. They drafted a 1st round center who has never been able to pass block the entire, as you guys know, from Kenny Clark and his performances, who's never been able to pass block. And then they extended him and they kept him here. And then you have one injury. This is the other thing about the Eagles. They have basically no injuries. The Vikings have that one injury of Christian Darrisaw. And guess where the worst matchup? I think Cam Robinson gave up 12 pressures in that game, which I haven't seen 12 before on a PFF sheet. So I don't know. Like, what do they do better? Well, they've just nailed a ton of draft picks. They seem to understand who fits them, like what type of player, what type of skill sets. And then even Nolan Smith, it's just a good example of they usually have things in place to develop those guys over a couple years. So it's not like they're ever drafting desperately. Oh yeah, we just need this. We're going to draft this because we have to. It seems like they always kind of have plans there. But as far as every other team trying to reach them, it's not going to be easy in the future because a lot of those guys are young. They have definitely set the bar for every other team to try to chase down.
It's maddening. Well, Matthew, I appreciate the time. Sorry about the technical hiccup at the beginning. That's just a little adversity. That's good. That creates stronger broadcasters. So I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Yeah, we failed like the rest of the NFC North, but we got through it, as they will as well. Thanks, Grant.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's Matthew Coller, Purple Insider. Appreciate his time. Bummer he's not going to be at the Super Bowl this year. So we'll have to see him another time. But I got to take a break. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. I'll get back to your phone calls right at 5 o'clock. We got loaded fine lens. Lot to discuss. So let's take our final break of the hour.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Quick high and by here to wrap up the hour. A little bit of a Rush Limbaugh. When we come back, I'll get to your phone calls. We got loaded phones. We can keep talking Packers as they relate to the Vikings or the Eagles or anything else we just discussed with Matt Coller. Appreciate him again, working through a technical hiccup. Jesse Temple at 5:30 to talk Badgers. So much more of the Wisco Sports Show coming up. We'll get an update from Zach. 2 minutes, no commercials. Be right back for hour number 2.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, while we wait for next week's Super Bowl in New Orleans, the annual Pro Bowl game is going to take place this weekend in Orlando. Packers going to be represented by Rashawn Gary, Xavier McKinney, and Josh Jacobs. Those last two big free agent additions for the club, with McKinney grabbing 8 interceptions. Jacobs finishing with the 5th most rushing yards in a single season for a Packers running back. Also scored 15 times, 3rd most in team history. Following the loss to Philly a couple of weeks ago, Jacobs mentioned the possibility of recruiting guys to the team, something that would be easy to do with all the stars down in Orlando for the games this week.
Main thing on my mind is figure out, how do we take that step? How do I help the guys take that step? But also, man, we got some guys that, like I said, that our locker room is going to be different. We got some guys due for a contract this year. We don't know what that's going to look like, how that's going to shake up. But I know I'm going to try to get some guys in here. So most definitely that.
Again, the Pro Bowl game is going to take place this weekend in Orlando. Turning to Wisconsin, they've added another assistant coach. Scott Power was announced as the assistant defensive backs coach, joins the Badgers after one season as the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan. He's the second assistant they've plucked from the Broncos, also adding wide receivers coach Jordan Reed.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Badgers back in action tonight as they take on Maryland. The two teams separated by just a half game in the standings, with Wisconsin in 4th, Maryland in 5th, and the Bucs going to be at San Antonio on Friday. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil-Prin.
It's a new soup, you know what I mean? So we got to get that can opener out and open up the ingredients and pour it in and stir it up. When you lose a guy with that impact, it's huge. For our club and how we're built, that's a big ingredient.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's Pat Murphy from back in December talking about the loss of Willie Adames. It's a big one. And as I said back at 4 o'clock, working some Brewers talk into tonight's show, I'll give the Brewers a benefit of the doubt. They've more than earned it over the last 4 or 5 years, despite a change at general manager, transitioning from an offensive team to a pitching-led team to an offense and bullpen-led team, right? No more Corbin Burns. Where'd Brandon Woodruff go? Now Freddie Peralta's the ace. And through it all, they've won games. They've outperformed expectation, whether it's the Vegas totals or the PECOTA projections, and they've been in the playoffs. This year, man, no Adames. Okay, fine. But now I also don't know who's playing third. Text from Jared in Manitowoc, AJ in Janesville, Coyote Mike saying, well, what if we kept Ortiz at third? That's fine. Then who you playing at short? Well, we could move Terang to short. Okay, well, then who's playing second? You know what I mean? Like, we're a couple sandwiches short of a picnic. None of them have any pop. And I know Terang had some power at the beginning of last year, and Ortiz has shown a little bit. But, guys, Adames was a 3.1 WAR player last year. He had 112 RBIs, almost 40 bombs. Like, replacing that is a little different than, oh boy, Woodruff's out this year. One of these 6 or 7 pitchers will have to have a good year. That's a little simpler. So I'm worried about it. If you have thoughts on that, I'll take your calls. Otherwise, we can continue that football discussion that Matt Coller so brilliantly got started. Appreciate his time as always from Purple Insider. Let's go back to the phones. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Denny from Holman.
Denny from Holman. Denny, I'm sorry I wasn't able to get you in last night. You called, and it was just as Mike was calling, so my apologies, but I'm glad you're back.
Dude, I enjoyed listening to you and Mike.
Oh, he's the best, isn't he? I enjoy listening to Mike.
He is the great. Bill's the great. You guys are all great.
Well,
I mean, it's just awesome.
You're great.
So, okay, here it is, buddy. 6 drafts, 61 total players, okay?
Okay.
I can go through them with you or tell you. There's only 17 out of the 61 on the team yet.
All you're talking about from Brian Gutekunst's drafts.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is startling, isn't it? I mean, 17 out of 61.
So who were some of those big misses? You were telling me about this yesterday.
Well, I think the big misses and stuff that they were like when they could have got TJ Watt.
That was Thompson, but yes, that is a big one.
Right. And just they could have got Cooper DeJean last year.
Could have.
And I mean, it's just amazing that all these guys are not there anymore. It's just unreal.
Give me a couple. You gave me a couple of these misses last night on
Okay.
hold. Give me a couple. Just a few.
Okay. Here you go. Josh Jackson, Oren Burks, Jamon Moore, Cole Madison, J.K. Scott, Valdez Scanlon, Equanimous St. Brown, James Looney, Hunter Bradley, Kendall Domerson, and Jay Sternberger, Kadar Holman, Dexter Williams, Ty Summers.
Oh, I like Ty Summers. I always thought Ty Summers was going to pop personally.
Me too. Kamel Martin, John Runyon, Jake Hansen, Simon Stepanek, Vernon Scott, Jonathan Garvin, Amari Rogers, Royce Newman, Shamar Jean Charles, Cole Van Lannen, Kylan Hill. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
It does. I liked Kylan Hill. I thought he was going to be good. I think he had some. I think mentally, the coaches called him out in the meeting, and then he got hurt returning kicks. God, the Packers just shouldn't return kicks. Look, why waste their time? They just get guys hurt and they turn the ball over.
Definitely. And I wanted to say one other thing that Ron Wolf said if he made any mistakes while he was the manager of the Packers, the GM, it was that he didn't hire Andy Reid for the coach.
That's been coming up a ton. Denny, that's a great call. Sorry I couldn't get you in yesterday. This has become a thing. And I'm not saying that it's a bad point. I'm just reacting. Got a lot of people on Bill's live stream, texting, calling, people like Denny on this show who's like, well, why did they let Andy Reid leave? It's like, well, I don't fully remember how or why it came to be. You know what? I shouldn't remember. I wasn't alive, I don't think. Or if I was very, very young. So Mariucci gets hired off of Holmgren's tree, goes to San Francisco, tries to take Andy Reid to be the offensive coordinator, and Holmgren blocked him. Okay. Then Andy Reid gets hired, to my knowledge, when Holmgren was still there. So, and maybe I'm wrong, but Packers fans, Denny, you're suggesting that once upon a time, the Packers should have blown out Holmgren to keep Andy Reid. Sometimes good coaches are going to move on and they're going to get promoted elsewhere. Sometimes they're going to get poached. Sometimes it happens. It's very funny how all of the sudden in 2025, Packers fans have been like, we had that guy once. Why'd we ever let him leave? He's a quarterback's coach. He hadn't called plays at the time. He hadn't even been an offensive coordinator yet. Mariucci wanted him. Smart guy. Goes to the Niners. Tries to bring Andy Reid. I wonder who he ultimately had. It was a very brief stint in San Francisco. I wonder who Mariucci had as his offensive coordinator instead. I'm going to look that up. But in the meantime, I'm going to take another call. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hi, Grant. It's Uncle Packer.
Hey, Uncle Packer. How's it going?
Hey, I want to kind of go back to something. I want to thank you. The Bob Uecker, when he left, that was hard for me. I mean, he was like my favorite sports.
He didn't just leave. When he passed away, yes.
Well, but he was 90. It was time for him to go. I'm glad I spent the last couple of years telling my children, you need to listen to this voice because this was the greatest announcer of all time. There'll never be another one. And I hope that they appreciate it because like I went to like 9 or 10 games last year and we would play a radio of his broadcast because that's true Brewers. When he was calling the games, he didn't call them any last year, but the last 2 or 3 years we've always had a radio playing Bob Uecker because it's the way the Brewers were meant to be. And your I don't want to say eulogy or like Zoolander, your Googleology was so good. That was so good. Thank you so much for that because you hit it around the nail. He was more than Vin Scully. He was more than these guys because he was Mr. Baseball. And I've been watching a lot, and it's I want to thank you for that very much.
Well, I appreciate that, Uncle
Bob
Packer.
was really important. And I also wanted to say to Clemhead Mike, I lost my dad at 17, but I had a great dad. And he died. He was 60 when I was born. He died when I was young, but I had 17 years with a wonderful father. And Clemhead, if you ever need a hug, bro, I'm just a little bit north of you.
I was going to say, I'm glad you Chippewa Valley folks sticking together.
Yeah, man, because that's tough.
That's tough.
And I have 9 children, and I hope I've been a good dad. That's important.
I bet you. That is very important.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Clemhead good guy. You know, I don't know him, but
Headstrong.
I like his takes.
Military man like yourself, I believe, right? Am I misremembering that? Yeah.
And yeah, no, I did 23 years, 10 months in the Navy, and I did 17 of that with the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I said something a couple weeks ago that kind of puts you back about 9/11.
No.
But I saw a lot of stuff while I was in, some stuff not so good.
I don't doubt it.
And I was there in that Desert Storm and stuff. And I'm kind of under the ilk that we probably should see that 9/11 bombing once a week to kind of remind us what we should be afraid of. And I apologize to you if that made you angry or hurt. I didn't want to do that.
No. You're good.
I mean,
No need to apologize, Uncle Packer. I appreciate the call. You and Clemhead should get together. No, don't apologize. Never apologize. Don't accept your apology. Thank you for the call. And yeah, I do miss Euchre. It's nice to talk a little baseball tonight. So someone's probably going to have to remind me, and there's 3 folks on hold, and I might be getting an earful or a lecture here. So Andy Reid got hired. So Mike Holmgren, I should put it this way. Holmgren was done in 98. Reid got hired by the Eagles in 99. So I guess maybe there was an opportunity for Ron Wolf to step in and keep the assistant. I was a year old. I was 1 year old. I just think it's funny all of a sudden that, almost 20 years later, no, more than 20 years later, 25, 24. I'm not a mathematician either. I was 1 year old and I can't do math, so sue me. But, 20 plus years later, we're talking about how they ever let the assistant leave. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell. What's up?
Listen, people didn't think Andy Reid was worth the clothes that he was wearing until he won Super Bowls with Kansas City either. I feel like that kind of gets lost. Like, yeah, he won a lot of games with Philadelphia, but they always fell apart in the playoffs for like 20 years. So it wasn't like he's viewed as one of the greatest of all time, and he is right now. I'm saying that he wasn't always viewed right like the way he is right now, because he didn't have that postseason success that he's had with Kansas City when he was with Philly. So
I think part of that is probably like Dante Culpepper and Michael Vick. Those are good quarterbacks, probably not world beaters, all-time greats. I think Andy Reid's also a lesson. Look, if you think a coach is good, you don't necessarily need to get hung up at, well, can they win the big one? I think that's a fallacy. I talked about that a month or two ago as it related to Packers-Vikings. It's like, do you think your coach is good? Okay, if you think you have a good coach, a lot of teams, what if the Chiefs would have brought in a first-time head coach to pair with Mahomes? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm trending more towards the McCarthys and the Andy Reids. Like, these are the types of coaches that should continue to get jobs further into their careers because of their experience and their depth of understanding of how football has changed and how it's grown. Like, maybe we're doing the first-time head coach thing too often. Maybe retreads should be more common.
Would Mike Tomlin fall in there for you?
I think he'd have to. He hasn't had a good quarterback since like 2016, and the last 5 years were just old, crappy Ben Worthlessberger. So yeah, I think Tomlin would fall in that group. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that Mike Tomlin is Mike McCarthy with a better publicist.
Maybe. People have said that of Sean Payton, too. Sean Payton continuing to get jobs. He's proven his salt in Denver, now with another quarterback and another environment, another system completely.
And then one other thing, to go back to the Brewers talk there. Obviously, they lost Euchre. They haven't made a signing yet, by the way.
No, nothing.
And I, for one, am actually all for it. I think there's no need to bring in anybody. Let's just roll with the young guys like we always do. And then, at least one or two of them are going to pop off and then leave in free agency. That's how it goes. So I'm good with the Brewers not doing anything. Keep it rolling.
That's both the most optimistic and pessimistic way to view it. Well, some of their young guys will pop and then they'll leave in free agency. So a lot of optimism and a lot of pessimism. Breaking news, John Cook is retiring. Nebraska's volleyball coach after 25 seasons. I didn't even know he was I didn't know he was even considering retirement. I didn't even know he was sick. Crossing jokes. Very few of you will get that. Let's continue to take calls. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Tony from Texas. Before I get into the Holmgren, Andy Reid stuff, I've got notes from the last 5 minutes. Holy cow.
Okay.
Clemhead Mike, I need to get the top 5 reasons why Clemhead Mike's dad died. Like, I got to figure that out. 2, Uncle Packer, the guy can field a baseball team. 9 kids, did I hear? You just glossed over that one. Wow.
I know. 9
Amazing.
kids. And he was in the Army. He was in Desert Storm. I don't know. We should write some memoirs of Collers. We should write some autobiography or some biographies, I
Wow.
suppose. I know.
Okay, Darnell, I got to pick on you a little bit. All right, sure. Andy Reid wasn't known as what he is now. Yeah, it takes some titles. Michael Jordan, before your time, obviously, first 7 years of his career was just known as a ball hog that couldn't get over the top. It takes a title or two. And I'm afraid if Matt LaFleur goes to another job, he will become what Andy Reid has become with the right situation. And I do believe in the retreads. I like the Pete Carroll hire. I know when Marty Schottenheimer, Shotty. I like when you were doing that Shotty the other day.
Shotty.
Oh, I love your Jerry. You're doing damn good, Jerry. Marty Schottenheimer couldn't get over the hump either, and he got hired a couple of times. Mike McCarthy should get another shot. So I'm okay with that. I like that. And, hopefully the Packers don't just pull the cord on LaFleur. I want this LaFleur-Gutekunst marriage to keep going, progressing. I think they just got to get a couple players here and there, and they do have to take a risk. I do. Okay, into Holmgren and Andy Reid. Holmgren screwed the Packers. The communication was terrible. There was rumblings after they won that first year that Holmgren wanted more power. He wanted to be a GM. This was coming out in early '97. He wanted to be a GM/coach. This was nothing new. They lost that second Super Bowl, and he was already a lame duck kind of guy. It was out there. He was going to leave us. So for them not to communicate with each other and get Andy Reid in there, if Ron Wolf thought that highly of him, that should be a little blip on Ron Wolf's resume, because he could have grabbed him and got him. You wouldn't know what you know now, but they went with Ray Rhodes, and it looked so bad to get Ray Rhodes. What happened to the Eagles? What happened to the Packers? The Packers had to then pivot and get Mike Sherman, kind of redirected things. But that Andy Reid hire, I brought that up to you too.
You did. You mentioned it. So you're saying, had they known Holmgren was, because
they did. They did know.
They did know.
More power. So they did know.
So this is what I'm saying. It's hard to envision a world in which they go to a Super Bowl in 96 or 97. They go to another one. It's hard to think in that moment, hey, in a year, this guy's going to be gone, right? No one would have thought that. So so you need to explain to me, and I know you've explained, but that's the dynamic at the end of the 90s is something that's foreign to me. I was 1 year old.
To put it in perspective, Mike Holmgren had bigger aspirations. He wanted to be the GM/coach, and I don't know how the communication went down with Ron Wolf, but it was out in the media that this was going to happen eventually, but there was no timeline. And again, we're not behind the scenes what's going on, but to me, Holmgren should have been talking to Ron Wolf about this, so then Holmgren can have some type of contingency. Ray Rhodes was on the Packers staff from, I believe, 92 to 94, but he was gone. He was with the Eagles after the Packers, and then he was replaced. With they replaced him, right? They took Rhodes in after Holmgren left, and they could have kept Reid, and obviously Reid was the right hire. But they had a chance. They did have a chance, and it's annoying. It's really annoying because he could have probably been the greatest coach ever. And imagine, I think, the titles that we would have had with Rodgers and Favre. I mean, it's kind of cool to go back and think about that.
It's very cool to go back and think about it, Tony. That's a great call. Thank you for waiting. I get a little lost in the points where it's like they should have X or Z. They should have this many titles. It's so difficult to do, especially because the Packers won a Super Bowl with Favre, won one with Rodgers. It's difficult for me to say, well, if they had only done this, they'd have 2 more. They'd have 3 more. People like to do this with the Bucks too and Budenholzer. They should have 3 titles. Okay, well, they have 1. We could talk about years where they really let an opportunity slip away. But when people start, well, think of all the titles. I don't know. Who knows how that would have gone with Andy Reid? I'd like to think he would have been great in Green Bay, but who knows? Does he last long? Does he last longer than McCarthy did? Does he ever make it to the Rodgers portion? I don't know. I got to think that he was limited a little bit in Philly by his quarterback, but he also probably needed to go through those growing pains. You don't think that Andy Reid, even now with Patrick Mahomes, doesn't remember situations in Philly? He's like, yeah, once upon a time I would have done this. Now I'm going to do this. It's not just that he got a better quarterback. Huge part of it. But he grew a lot as a coach too. You learn a lot in failure. And then to go to Kansas City, get a better quarterback, and to get to apply some of those previous, blunders, those previous experiences, not even blunders, experiences. There's a lot of value in that. So I don't know. A lot of professionals will tell you should change jobs. You should, to get more money, to learn. I think that probably applies to coaches too. You coach in different spots with different players. You have different experiences and you learn and you get better. All right, another call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Second cousin Mike.
Hey, Mike, what's going on?
Well, first off, I want to say to Uncle Packer and all our veterans, thank you for your service.
Dang straight. I love his tales from the Marine Corps out in not San Francisco, in San Diego. I like when he tells us stories of his world travels and his time in the military. But you're absolutely right.
Right. Well, and I've got a wonderful woman who spent 29 years in the Air Force. So
people, I can't imagine. That's a life of service that I'm not cut out for. I have a lot of respect for folks like that.
Absolutely. So I listened to the show last night, but I couldn't call in.
Okay.
And you were talking about Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson.
Jerry. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry.
No, it was about this time, and I think Darnell made the point that it probably drove Jerry nuts that his team was winning and all the credit was going to Jimmy Johnson. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, but do you know who all the credit should honestly go to?
Not Aikman. I don't think you're going to say Aikman.
No, it should go to the Minnesota Vikings for trading for Herschel Walker.
That's a good point. Yeah. I suppose you're right.
They made a haul on that.
How often, we were just talking about the Eagles about a half hour ago. How often is one stroke of brilliance by one team explained as a stroke of complete idiocy from another? You know what I mean? Like the Colts giving the Eagles a first and a second for Carson Wentz, or first and third, whatever it turned out to be, right? Whenever a team makes a brilliant move, there's always another side. Wow, the Packers were so smart to draft Aaron Rodgers at 24. Well, think of the other, 22 teams when you take out the Niners who passed on him, right? Like every good move can be explained as a bad move for somebody else.
Absolutely.
The Minnesota Vikings. And maybe we should give more credit to the Vikings. I appreciate that, second cousin Mike. Appreciate the call. Yeah, I think it did drive Jerry Jones a little nuts. To go back to yesterday, maybe we'll have to play a little bit more Jerry Jones audio. It's just so good. One more call, and then we'll take our break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Jeff from Chippewa.
Hey, what's going on, Jeff?
Hey, I wanted to give you a little history about Ron Wolf and
Perfect.
The way that Packers set it up. Back in the, I believe it was the early 90s, one of my brothers, which is, by the way, one of 9 kids in our family, was working on a project for his firm in Chicago. And it was called the Packer Project. And they hired him and the firm to make Green Bay a championship team again.
Mm-hmm.
And he met with all kinds of Packers. He met with Bart Starr. He met with Hog Hanna. He met with Lindy Infante, who was the coach at the time. He said Infante was a great guy, but he wasn't a head coach. Anyway, what they advised was that Green Bay should consider firing Infante, hiring Bill Parcells as the coach / GM.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually tried to do that. And they didn't get him. And then they hired Ron Wolf, who hired Mike Holmgren. And then they, he was able for years in his business to be able to use that, because they did make Green Bay Pack champions again, because they brought in Holmgren and Ron Wolf, and Wolf got them players that they wanted to. But I knew the Friday before that they fired Infante that he was probably going to be fired, and they were going to go this direction. And they did, and it proved to be effective.
I'm interested now, and it's not revisionist history, Jeff, and I appreciate that because I need the history lesson in the 90s. I wasn't alive. It's so fascinating to me how a crop of amazing coaches, and there's been books written on it between Gruden and Mariucci and Reed, how they were all there. And I need to go back and learn the history of how it went from back-to-back Super Bowls to Holmgren is gone. Just like that. And I think that sticks with some Packers fans. Tony was telling us about that, right? And how, Ray Rhodes, they hired the wrong guy to replace him. But maybe had they known, or, there was some animosity at the end with Holmgren, maybe it would have been done. It could have been done differently in a way that's better for the Packers. And that's some history that I need to learn, which is fine. I need to do some reading off to Wikipedia. I'll spend 3 minutes reading. Make that my project for the rest of the week. Got to take a break. I'm woefully late. 3 minutes. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Now, I get my proverbial ass kicked over needing people in my comfort zone. Without this thing being about me in any way, if you don't think I can't operate out of my comfort zone, you're so wrong. It's unbelievable. This is as big a risk as you could take. As big a risk as you could take. No head coaching experience. Now, let me share something with you. With all of that, you've just heard him reference his osmosis, his family. Anybody in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort. But then you go around to the countless numbers of coaches that Shotty has served on staff with and been around, the countless players. How often do you have someone that has 25, I'm going to say 25, it may be 26, of years of working through the human relationship and working, aspiring to learn, of have his ears and eyes wide open and looking for techniques and looking for things that make coaches better.
A little bit more Jerry Jones yesterday. I want that voice to read me an audiobook. I know some people just despise the guy. Oh, Jerry's embarrassing himself. I don't know. He's one of a kind. I enjoy unique personalities. And that delivery, just listen to him talk. I want him to narrate an audiobook, maybe something Coen Brothers-ish. Like, you're telling me you wouldn't listen to a Jerry Jones narrated version of No Country for Old Men? It'd be perfect. Imagine him reading that final monologue from Robert. Is it Robert Duvall at the end? Or no, God, I picture his name. It's not Billy Bob Thornton. It's another name like that, and it's gonna drive me nuts. Whatever. I'm gonna take a call and Google it in the meantime. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Clement Mike.
Hey, Clemhead. Do you remember who the cop was in No Country for Old Men?
Oh, I saw that movie too, and I just can't remember. Sorry.
It's driving me nuts. It's Tommy Lee Jones, and not Billy Bob Thornton. Tommy Lee Jones. I knew it was something like that. All right.
Yeah.
Now I've scratched that itch. What did you want to talk about? Sorry to instantly derail your phone call before it even starts.
I wanted to thank Uncle Packer for all the kind words. He seems like a great guy, and Mrs. Uncle Packer must think he's a great guy too. 9 kids. Wow.
9 kids, right? What a run!
Must really like him.
No kidding. Can't get enough.
Yeah.
World needs more Uncle Packers.
But if I ever get a chance to see him, give him a great big hug and tell him thanks. I hope you have another get together in Eau Claire and Menominee one of these days soon. Maybe he can come and you get such great support from the Chippewa Valley. So
I know. I got to get back up there. I got a show or two in La Crosse planned over the next couple months. I got to find an excuse and a reason to go up to Eau Claire. Maybe like a Memorial Day weekend or something when I want a 3-day weekend to go up there and see my parents or something. We'll get something on the books.
Well, yeah, I texted Bill about have another get together up at High Shores in Chippewa Falls. He said he's trying to get one together for a cigar dinner. I don't live 3 miles from there now, so if anybody needs a ride, anybody needs a sack out, I have a guest room now, and I got lots of couches. So
you can book.
And if you guys have too many, I can have a great night out without drinking. I do it all the time, so I'll drive you home.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure he'll do it. He always does at least one cigar dinner up there in the Chippewa Valley. I feel like 1 or 2 in La Crosse, 1 or 2 up there, unless he missed last.
And you got to come.
All right, twist my arm. I'll enjoy a fish fry and smoke a cigar. I'll be there. I can carry his equipment in or something. I'll find a way to make it work related.
Right. So yeah, it's on the subject of dads too. I'm sorry he lost his dad so young. That just sucks. I wish he could have kept his dad longer. And I had my dad around when I was in my 60s, which really sucked. But yeah. So yeah, Rick from Spencer on the live stream and we both had a lot of problems with our dads. We were talking about that, and it taught us to be better people. Like I was telling Rick that my grandchildren, my grandnieces and grandnephews all told me they love me, so I win. I determined to be the kind of person, like Mark Twain said, be the kind of man that when you die, even the Undertaker sheds a tear. So that's a good bit.
Did Mark Twain say that?
Yeah.
He probably meant the actual Undertaker and not the wrestler, the Undertaker. That just occurred to me.
They didn't have wrestling.
They didn't have WWE in Mark Twain's time.
So they had real wrestling in those days.
Yeah, just like Edgar Allan Poe wasn't writing about the Baltimore Ravens. I suppose I should have been able to put 2 and 2 together there.
Yeah. And the murders in the Rue Morgue, they were committed by orangutan. I hope I didn't ruin it for you. It has been 200 some years.
The murders in the what now?
The murders in the Rue Morgue, the Edgar Allan Poe novel. They were committed by an orangutan.
I saw that they are adapting potentially. Is it Scarlet Letter or Mask of the Red Death with Sydney Sweeney? Now that I would watch that because I'm a fan of poetry and also just a good actress performance. I'm there. I'll buy the ticket for that.
I would watch Sydney Sweeney read the phone book. So
yeah, I would too. I would listen to Jerry Jones do it, and I would watch Sydney Sweeney just because she's so talented.
Grant, I just want to thank you so much for all the Jerry Jones quotes. I could listen to him all day.
I could too. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's electric, and I love his folksy. Thank you, Clement. I'm just behind. I got to take a break. I could listen to him. There's just no one like him, and I know everyone rolls their eyes at him, but I'm telling you, folks, when he's dead and gone, you're going to miss him. He's probably going to outlive us all, but I mean, just come on.
Especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort.
Who talks like this?
But then you go around to the countless numbers of coaches that Shotty has served on staff with and been around, the countless players. How often do you have someone that has 25, I'm going to say 25, it may be 26.
There's not an there's
of
not
years
an ah.
of working through the human relationship and aspiring to learn, of have his ears and eyes wide open and looking for techniques and looking for things that make coaches better.
It's just so good. We're going to get to Jesse Temple next. People can complain about Jerry Jones. They can disparage him. It's fine. I'm glad he doesn't own my football team, but I will continue to enjoy every time a microphone is stuck in his face. And it happens a lot, luckily, for us in the sports talk radio world. 5 minutes. We'll come back. Jesse Temple next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. I appreciate everybody who has called and contributed to the show. Nice to work in some Brewers conversation today. Coyote Mike texts in, Tony is correct. That's the last thing Tony needs to hear. Holmgren wanted to leave for a head coach GM job, and it was a topic during the Super Bowl week in 98. I believe it was enough of a distraction, and Holmgren did not have the team ready, and consequently they lost to Denver. My nightmare came true. I'm out on the head coach GM combo. There's just way too many examples of it not working. I want a GM who's fully ensconced in player evaluation and roster moves, and I need a coach I want you to coach the team. The GM is going to GM, the coach is going to coach. So I'm just out on any. I don't care if it's Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick probably would have continued winning games had he had a GM picking players that didn't suck. That was his big problem at the end, too. Jesse Temple joined me earlier this afternoon to talk Badgers, mostly basketball, because there's not much going on. It's been a quiet week for college football and Badgers football now that we're a week or so removed from the national title game. So here's our conversation from earlier. Jesse Temple is here. You can read his work at The Athletic. He's on The Camp and The Swing. I was listening to The Swing on my way in this morning. They had a great interview with Kamari McGee last week. You should check that out as well. I began my day today with reading your story about John Blackwell in his breakout season. So tell us a little bit about some of the conversations you had, some of the background that you learned about Blackwell in writing the story that maybe previously you didn't know, or Badgers fans would find germane in enjoying kind of his breakout season this year.
Sure. Well, John Blackwell's dad, Glenn, was a 4-year shooting guard at Illinois, and I had a chance to talk to Glenn about his basketball career. What I found so fascinating was that he nearly had a cup of coffee in the NBA, was an undrafted free agent, but kept making the next cut with the Seattle Supersonics. First, it was a summer invitational in Portland, Oregon. Then he was invited to a summer league in Los Angeles. Then he got into a camp with the veterans, but cutdown day was looming, and he was one of 12 players vying for the last roster spot on the team. And ultimately, the head coach told him it wasn't going to be him. It ended up being Avery Johnson, who played 16 years in the league. But Glenn said that he was more of a catch-and-shoot player. And when he was going through that tryout, he realized that being a combo guard was necessary to make it in the league. And he said, that's something that I always remembered, something I tried to instill in John. And so even though that tryout was in 1988, all these years later, that has proven to be very influential in the development of John's game, because John, very clearly an excellent combo guard. He can do a lot of different things, but he's also the starting point guard for Wisconsin this season and what has become a breakout sophomore season. So he and his dad are extremely close, and he gives his dad a ton of credit for where he's been able to go. But of course, John has put in the work as well.
I think the sign or the mark of a great basketball player and a smart basketball player is their ability to play off another great basketball player, right? And Blackwell, I think from last year to this year, I suppose I could look up stats to back this up. It's just what my eye test tells me. He's a better catch and shoot. He can play off of someone like John Tonje very well, where maybe last year, Blackwell had the ball in his hand a lot. He would drive very physical around the rim. This year, with Tonje's ability to draw defenders and to draw attention, Blackwell seemingly more available and better at catching and shooting when that space is given to him. So I think that's been reflected in the way that he's played this year, right, Jesse?
Yeah, obviously he put in the work in the offseason, but the biggest thing, and this is something that Greg Gard talked about even before the first game this year was played, is the confidence level that John came into with this season. And he compared it to what he saw from Johnny Davis a few years ago, making that leap from freshman year to then becoming an All-American and an NBA lottery pick after sophomore seasons. Now, Greg was not suggesting that John was going to be an NBA lottery pick after a sophomore season, so John's trajectory, very good right now for whatever the future may hold. But it was that confidence and that he stepped onto the floor in the summer and he was the best guy on the court. And what I think is interesting about what you're saying about John Tonje, Blackwell sought out Tonje this summer to guard, to go after, when it was very clear that Tonje was going to be one of the best players, if not the best player on the team as a 6-year transfer. And when I had a chance to talk to Tonje for the story, he talked about that John Blackwell he said he was killing us in the summer, if I'm being honest. And that's obviously carried over to this season because John Blackwell has doubled his scoring output and been a real catalyst here for a Wisconsin team that's now ranked 17th in the country.
What's been some of the differences or what have you noticed comparing this season with Tonje being the straw that stirs the drink? And certainly there's lots of other good guys on this team, but I think it starts with Tonje. You and Zach on the Swing talked about his flexibility to score at all three levels. So it starts there. What differences have you noticed this year comparing to last year with AJ Storr when he was kind of that straw, and he's now at Kansas. He hasn't had an awesome season. I'm not trying to drag him, but maybe what are some similarities or differences that you've seen from last year to this year?
In terms of comparing John Conji to AJ Storr?
Yeah, and the way the rest of the team plays and succeeds around that central player.
Well, obviously, AJ Storr was dynamic and athletic from the wing. He was so explosive and could get to the rim. John Conji is a much more efficient scorer of the basketball, and he's a 92% free throw shooter. He's got that, as Greg says frequently, grown man strength and a grown man understanding of the game. He's a 3-level scorer. He can consistently get to the rim, but I just think this team in general is playing off each other so much better. And I would also say a big part of this is year 2 of the reconfigured offense where Kirk Penny helped to implement what's called a ball screen continuity system. I wrote about it a year ago because it was such a drastic departure from what Wisconsin had done previously. It worked very well a year ago until obviously it didn't, with Wisconsin fizzling out in the last 2 months or so. But they've been able to elevate it this year to a level that we really haven't seen, where Wisconsin is averaging more than 80 points a game, the most points the Badgers have scored in the season since 1970-71. And Greg's focus with the team this year was open threes, shots at the rim, and free throws. And they have really adhered to that because they're going to set a program record for most three-pointers made and attempted in a single season. So there are a lot of reasons why Wisconsin offensively has been better.
So based on what you've seen and what you've heard talking with players and coaches, do you think the defense is coming along? Because I've really heard a lot of mentions and I've seen scribes like you writing about that part of the team and how that's going to take a little bit longer. Greg Gard has talked about that. Have you seen that growth, let's say, over the last month or so?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, you look at a game like UCLA and you think, oh my goodness, Wisconsin made 15 threes and lost that game. How many years could you go where you saw Wisconsin score 83 points and never lose a game? And obviously they lost that game. But for the most part, I think they've been better, especially of late. You look at some of these victories, they held Rutgers to 63, Minnesota to 59. They beat USC and held them under 70. Nebraska was not good. And I know the Cornhuskers aren't a great team this year, but they scored 55 points. So I do think there are some things that have gotten better for Wisconsin defensively, and will have to continue to get better if Wisconsin wants to have success in the NCAA tournament.
Jesse Temple is here, the athletic, the camp, and the swing. What does Wisconsin need to do tonight against Maryland and then down the stretch in their schedule against the better teams in the Big Ten that they were unable to do when they first started their conference schedule, when they lost to Illinois and to Michigan?
Well, that is a key here in the last month and a half, because this is the toughest part of the schedule. Certainly the Maryland game is part of that. They've got a stretch where there's 3 consecutive ranked teams against Purdue, Illinois, and Oregon. That doesn't even include having to go to East Lansing and play Michigan State. They've got to continue to be efficient offensively. This is the most efficient team that Greg Gard has had in a decade here in terms of offensive efficiency. And I think you just need productivity out of the 6 or 7 guys that you have out there. Steven Crowell's got to play like the best version of Steven Crowell. If you can't have games like we saw earlier in the year where Wisconsin lost the game and Steve had no rebounds, and Greg was willing to publicly call him out for that. You just need everybody performing at their best and rounding into form at the right time.
You mentioned Greg Gard calling out Steven Crowell. It's funny, that was back in early December. Have you noticed this is a team, maybe more so than previous teams, that really responds to the messaging of Greg Gard when he pushes or when he pulls? Because sometimes, I think back to, some of the drama, the Nate Reavers year, like sometimes it just doesn't click. Sometimes the season doesn't go according to plan or the players don't respond to the coaches. This is a year where you really think these players and Coach Gard are attached with how they're communicating and pushing each other?
Yeah, it's hard to compare year over year, but for the most part, I think it helps that who are the guys that are playing? They're all veterans who have been here before. Now, John Blackwell is only a sophomore, but he was a key reserve a year ago. Conji's in his 6th year. I mean, he's been at 3 college programs. Max Klesman is a multi-year starter. Steven Crowell is a multi-year starter. Nolan Winter, like Blackwell, is only a sophomore, but got critical minutes a year ago and has been a starter. Kamari McGee is a senior. Carter Gilmore has been here 5 years. Like, there are so many players that are key component in this rotation that just understand what it takes to succeed at this level, that I think that helps. But I think Greg Gard deserves a lot of credit. I know you've got the fire Gardometer on your shows, which I think is hilarious, especially when the team is winning the way that it is. But for evolving the way that he really has, and he deserves a ton of credit for being willing to have new input from his assistant coaches, for understanding the direction that college basketball was headed, and for implementing these changes that, if you just look at the box scores, they are drastic from what we came to know about Wisconsin 5-10 years ago.
So I always I always try to find at least one football thing, even as we get further removed from the football season and we get more heavy with basketball. But I haven't really been able to find anything. It seems pretty quiet with Badgers football. Is there anything that you've been following or Badgers football fans should be watching for or thinking about right now before I let you go?
Nah, not really. I mean, there's a lot of recruiting going on. They just hosted a junior day, their first of 2 junior days over the weekend. They had 9 players in, players that continue to come in earlier in the week. And Wisconsin's coaches have hit the road. There's about to be a month-long dead period where there's not going to be much going on.
Sure.
But I got a question for a mailbag that's running on Friday about whether there should be any concern about the fact Wisconsin's one of 4 Big Ten teams that only has 1 player committed in the 2026 recruiting class. And I said, no, not at all. You can look traditionally, and 2 years ago under Luke Fickell, they had 2 players committed at this time. They're going to still end up with 20 to 25 players. The bulk of those commitments are going to come a few in the spring, but the majority of them in June and July. And it's just an ongoing process that really never ends.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you could always look to the next class or months down the road, but it seems pretty quiet with football right now. And I will do you a favor, a parting gift, by not asking you for an update on the Xavier Lucas situation. Because I think at some point, is everyone just going to lose interest in this thing? It's going to maybe go to court and there's going to be legal. I think this is going to be spread out so long that people just kind of lose interest.
I don't know what the end game is there, but thank you for not asking.
Yeah.
So I'm going to not answer.
All right, that's fine. Jesse Temple, The Athletic, the Camp of the Swing. Appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon.
Yep. See ya. Bye.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Last couple of minutes. Time to sneak in 1 or 2 more calls. I'm sorry if one of you weren't able to get in earlier. Hit me up, 608-321-1670. Shout out to Flipside Pub and Grill. Food and fun without the franchise. Right outside downtown La Crosse, just across from Menards. You can't miss it. They're one of the sponsors helping send the show to the Super Bowl, Radio Row, next week. Appreciate them. In the past, they've helped us out with trips to spring training and whatever we've wanted to do with the show. They've been like, yeah, absolutely, we're into it. It's the 2-for-1 happy hour Tuesday through the end of the week, 3 to 6 after work, 2-for-1 house wines, tap beers, and rail mixers. Cannot recommend the Friday night fish fry enough. We are now into fish fry season. Now that we're through football, now it's just kind of crummy in winter and it's dark outside. Fish fry season. Take advantage of that Friday night. If you're not a fish person, they have a delicious chicken dinner as well. If you don't like fish, you have a fish allergy, everybody's got that friend. So make sure you take advantage of that on Friday. Nightly food specials as well, right? Cheap burgers one night, fish tacos another night, wings, all that sort of thing. So something every night. 2-for-1 happy hour throughout. And then on the weekends, bloodies, mimosas, screwdrivers until 4 in the afternoon. Good breakfast food at Artie's as well. Let's take a call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, how we doing? How we doing?
Vagabond, I'm excellent.
Today.
Yeah, normally we don't chat this late.
No, I was kind of listening to everybody taking in, really intrigued on Jesse's last point that he made there on Wisconsin football recruiting. I liked how he used 2 years ago for Luke Fickell when he was like month 3 on the job. Like, oh, he didn't have anybody recruited on month 3, so it's all going to be fine.
You think it's more dire now, 2 or 3 years in?
Well, I think year 3 in recruiting is kind of what it matters, right? I mean, the last 2 classes have been really big. And so I think what I'm looking for in Wisconsin is going after the big guys, which to their credit, like I think they're looking for cherries on top that can like contribute pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think they got a lot of depth in the last couple of classes, but people want to pretend that they're elite classes in the last couple of years, but they are not championship level classes. And I think you look at the programs that do have a lot of commits right now, and they're the type of programs that we want to be. I think Ohio State's got like 6. Hell, Iowa's got 6 commits right now. So I don't know if I like the complacency from the old recruiting side right now. Not that off-season January recruiting matters too much, but
is Mason Posa one of those types of players when you're like, if you're going to have less quantity, maybe a little bit more quality guys that can pop right away, Mason Posa would have to be one of those guys, right? That type of guy?
No, I think that's the type of guy that they got. And I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to come in as a true freshman. I'm talking about actual 5 stars or high 4 stars, right? Mason Post is ranked like 200th in the country or something like that on some of the sites.
Well, sure, but by Wisconsin standards, like, can we expect him to do that much better consistently?
But again, we're not paying for Wisconsin, old school Wisconsin standards. We're paying 35, 40% more. We're not. This isn't the old Big Ten. You can't have guys like Mason Posa. 5 years ago, that'd be an awesome guy to be the top of the class. Now I'm saying I want 4 Mason Postas and then 2 guys that, don't kill me, but like Graham Mertz style recruits, but they actually work out.
Yeah. Well, that's key.
So
no, I got you. I know what you mean. That's a good call. And we're mentioning football on our way out the door. I'm not going to break down Jesse's commentary on a lack of a class. I don't know. This Xavier Lucas thing's got people's eyes and ears too. Let's take one more call. Wisco Sports Show. We got about a minute, so make it quick.
Ridge Runner Mark, how we doing, sir?
I'm good, Ridge Runner. What's up?
Okay. So would you rather, we're talking Packers first-round draft pick this year, would you rather them trade up to get a bona fide number 1 first pick that's going to be an impact player, or take that pick, trade it for a proven commodity elsewhere in the league, like a veteran presence?
Interesting. Both options are intriguing to me, Ridge Runner. Maybe we could talk more about this tomorrow. Maybe Bill will bring this up on the huddle tonight. Who knows? Lots of good Packers conversation coming up in just a few minutes. Look, if you could package something for Max Crosby, that's my dream. And I will set my sights high and get my hopes up. It's probably very unrealistic. Trading a first-round pick means you're getting a star. It's not like, well, we're getting a proven guy. No. You don't trade first-round picks for proven guys. You trade first-round picks for bona fide superstars. So if you're trading that first-round pick for a bona fide superstar, which I assume you are, I'd be jacked about that. I'd be jacked if they jump up to get someone they believe to be game-breaking in the first round. Wide receiver? Probably not going to happen, but maybe. We can talk more about this tomorrow. I like both options. Depends who it is. Kind of a cop-out answer. Sorry, Ridge Runner. Bill Michaels Huddle coming up next. I'll talk to the rest of you at 4 tomorrow.